Welcome back, everybody. This is Eric here with Iraq Veteran 8888. Today, we've got a very special Gun Gripe episode for you. I have a special guest here with me today, Mr. Stephen Gutowski. He is a writer for the Washington Free Beacon. Definitely go check him out on Twitter. Great dude, tons of great ideas, and we are going to get into the beans and bullets of today's Gun Gripe. Unfortunately, we have bad news that we have to acknowledge here, and as hard as it is for us to say this in the way that we have to say it, we have had a Supreme Court justice pass away, Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Of course, a celebrated member of the liberal community, okay, and a very strong woman, a three-time, cancer survivor, so a fighter till the end. And we have to give credit where it's due. She was a tough lady, and she put up a heck of a fight. And I'd like to give my condolences to her family, her colleagues, her peers. She made great strides in women's rights, and she had accomplished a lot of excellent things in her career that are worth, giving a celebration to. So it is unfortunate. Her passing could not come at a worse time for our country. 2020 has been a terrible year, and it feels like 2020 can't get any worse. Unfortunately, there is a certain political realm that has to be entered immediately, and there is unfortunately no way around it. It has to be done, and that is the issue of, all right, who's going to be the next Supreme Court pick? And there's obviously a heck of a lot of controversy surrounding this situation, which we'll dive into a bit.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So,
it is really unfortunate. RBG was a liberal icon, really, of the court. And, whether or not you agree with all of the things that she ruled or all the opinions she wrote, she was, a real stalwart, and she was a fighter. Like you said, she beat cancer several times before finally passing away here recently. But, she was really good friends with Antonin Scalia, too, who's a conservative icon of the court. And I think that's something that, is fairly inspiring and something that we can take a little bit of a message away from in our own lives. But certainly her death brings up a political fight that's going to be quite big.
definitely complicates 2020 election.
Oh yeah, sure. Certainly. Another thing happens in 2020, right? We got so much going on already. And now we have another major event. Like in any election, a Supreme Court justice dying, especially with the potential for moving the sort of ideological center of the court at all, that would be a huge issue in any normal election. And in 2020, it's just another one of our huge issues we're already dealing with. From the coronavirus to the economy to the rioting, to just there's so much going on already. But certainly the reality of Ginsburg's death is that she needs to be replaced on the court at some point. And it's very likely with Republicans having control of both the presidency and the Senate, which is what you need because the president makes the recommendation and then the Senate is the one that actually confirms it. And so you saw in 2016, right, we had Scalia died. And that was another area where you could have seen the change in the ideological balance of the court because the president at the time was Barack Obama, who's liberal, and Scalia is a conservative justice, an icon, like we said. But in that case, the Senate was controlled by the opposite party, by the Republicans, and they chose not to confirm or even have hearings for Obama's pick, Merrick Garland, because they thought, well, let's see what happens with the elections, and if the Republican candidate wins 2016 and we have a Republican Senate, we'll be able to get a justice that we prefer instead of the one that Obama put up. And that's exactly what happened, right? I mean, Trump won the 2016 elections. Republicans maintained control of the Senate. They nominated Gorsuch, and he's on the Supreme Court now. And so, yeah, I mean, you had a lot of sort of PR arguments where, McConnell said, well, because the party controlling the presidency and the Senate are different, we're not going to, go through with the nomination, and that's what the president should be. But you had some other Republicans that went a bit further than that out into, we're just not going to confirm we shouldn't confirm anyone in an election year. And now those Republicans are having to sort of walk back what they said, like Lindsey Graham, for instance, said this. But I mean, he argues that the Kavanaugh, the firestorm around the Kavanaugh nomination has changed his mind. And so, the politicians have reasons for why they do, why they argue one thing or another. But the reality is that the Senate gets to decide. The rest is kind of PR stuff. Like, the polling might be bad. We'll see how it affects them politically. They might get hurt at the ballot box if they push through a nominee and the general public doesn't like that they did that and wanted them to wait. Because obviously we're only 45 days away from the election here, so it's real soon. But there's no legal precedent that would stop them from doing that. So I think that Republicans, it'll be interesting because some of them might want to wait for the Supreme Court pick until after the election so that they can say to their voters, look, if you vote for me, you'll get the Supreme Court nominee that you want. Whereas if you vote for a Democrat, you'll have, you won't get a conservative justice. And
I think that there's a distinctive statement that needs to be made, in that an important takeaway from this is that voting has consequences. Mm-hmm. Okay, so, had the Democrats had control of the Senate in 2016, then they would have appointed the Obama's Supreme Court pick, and they would have totally done it 110%. There wouldn't have been some, pushback or some, we should wait. Well,
and to be fair to Republicans now who are sort of switching their position from 2016, Democrats are doing the exact same thing.
Well, what I'm trying to say is that the Democrats, when they have power, they use it. They wield it. They wield it like a battle axe, right? So if you gave them an opportunity to get a liberal Supreme Court justice nominee put in, of course they would do it. The only difference is that now, fast forward to 2020, and now we're in the exact same situation they were with Scalia back then. Now they're just angry and bitter that we actually have the government in place that we need, that the people elected, because elections have consequences, to actually do what we need to do. And so the same system that tried to impeach Trump, right? This whole drama that came apart with the impeachment process and all of the millions of dollars of studies and tax money and all this crap that got thrown at that situation, all the investigating and all this mess, right? Just tying up government in general, right? That costs money, right? The taxpayers float the bill for this stuff, right? So the same government that tried to impeach President Trump, is the same government, the same people that are saying, we should wait. Well, wait a minute. We elect government to do what they need to do their job. And part of the president's job and the Senate's job is that when a Supreme Court justice passes away or resigns, then they've got to elect a Supreme Court justice. That's part of the system. That's part of what we do. And Donald Trump is president until Election Day. And if that decides different, then that decides different. But until that day comes, he's the president, and it's his duty to elect a Supreme Court justice. Now, I will say that, 40, 45 days before the election, it does paint a very difficult picture because it's a hard decision that has to be made. And he's obviously already made the decision to nominate a Supreme Court justice pick. Didn't you have a list of some of his picks? Yeah,
well, he's already, to President Trump's credit, he's even back in 2016, he was putting out lists of people he said he would nominate, and he's mostly stuck to those lists with Kavanaugh and Gorsuch, and so he's got a list out now of the people he would want on there, and some of them are.
I just didn't know if that was going to change,
Well, he updated it recently, actually, before this, and so it includes people like several senators on there now, like Ted Cruz and Tom Cotton and Mike Lee from Utah.
I don't think Ted Cruz wants it.
No, well,
he hasn't really expressed interest in it.
Yeah, the speculation right now is that there's two top candidates. They're both women because I think Trump has said that he thinks he will most likely choose a woman candidate to replace Ginsburg, who was obviously a pioneer for women's rights. And
that's a kind gesture.
Sure, yeah, that's something he said he wants to do with this pick, and so that. The speculation at this point, and Trump has mentioned both of these appeals court justices before, but they're it's Barbara. Let's see, what's her name here? It's
You've got a list.
Yeah, I was just doing a little bit of research on both of them before we started.
Yeah, and this is all very new stuff, you know.
Oh, yeah.
I think, let's see, what's
we don't
today?
know the pick yet either.
Yeah, we don't know the pick at the time that this video is being
It's just
recorded.
speculation based off. He specifically publicly said he liked Barbara Lagoa, who is on the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals right now. She was actually just recently Trump appointed her to the 11th Circuit, and she went through that confirmation with 80 votes, which is pretty good in this day and age as far as an appeals court appointee from President Trump goes. So I guess she's considered maybe to be a little bit less risky option, might go over a little bit easier for some, more moderate people. I'm not, that's one of the talking points out there, at least. And then there's also Amy Coney Barrett, who is another Trump appointee to I believe she's the 7th Circuit Court of Appeals. And so she was a little more controversial. I know she had several Democrats went pretty hard after her in her confirmation hearings, but another prominent woman judge who he's considering. And so those are the top two names right now. He said he wants to make a pick by the end of this week, and his position on it now. Obviously, he doesn't. If Trump he didn't have to do this. He doesn't have to appoint someone before the election if he doesn't want to. But he's said that he does want to, and he wants to move quickly. There's still some question about whether or not the confirmation would happen before the election or maybe after the election. And there are some Republicans only have, 4-seat majority in this, or 3-seat majority in the Senate, which means
two have already swung.
Two came out. Murkowski and Collins both said they don't want to vote before the election. And I think Collins said she wants the president who wins this election to make the appointment.
Well, I bet the whispering in the halls right now, I guarantee you they're trying to convince two more to go. We're not doing it.
Oh, sure. That's what Democrats... That's really
dang well that's what they're doing.
That's the only chance that Democrats have to stop the nomination, essentially, is if they can convince two more Republicans to
jump ship,
to not vote for it.
Yeah.
So it seems unlikely to me. I think the most likely outcome is that Republicans appoint a new justice. That seems like regardless of what happens with the election, just to be
so
totally
the politics of this situation, right? And I know that politics can be a sensitive subject for some, and I know there's people tuning in going, well, wait a minute, this is gun gripes. What does this have to do with guns? Well, it's very important. I want to pivot to that.
Yeah.
I know that there's the logistics and the behind the scenes things as to the lifeblood of the situation, but we want to talk about the Second Amendment ramifications of this situation. As you know, there's been a lot of Second Amendment cases go to the Supreme Court and they don't get heard at the Supreme Court. They get turned down and passed down to a lower court. And if we can get another conservative, reasonably good, somewhat right-leaning type of person as a Supreme Court justice to replace Ruth, well, then that kind of tips the balance a little bit more into, all right, now we might actually be able to get some Second Amendment cases to the Supreme Court to be heard. And then the general idea is that, obviously, since we kind of have, a 4/5 on that situation, that generally the Supreme Court should kind of rule in our favor. That's the general idea.
That's what makes it so important. I mean, obviously, it goes beyond guns to lots of other issues, but for guns specifically, it's...
For the people watching this channel,
it's extremely...
It's a gun issue.
It's something that's going to matter a whole lot who fills this seat.
Right.
And like you said, I mean, the interesting thing
it could come down to cannabis legalization. It could come down to any hot number.
There's so many
button topics.
The Supreme Court deals with just all kinds of stuff, but they obviously are extremely important when it comes to gun rights.
Yes.
Because the Second Amendment, for years, was basically just ignored. And even now, a lot of the justices argue that it's still being ignored. It's still being treated as a second-class right. That's what Justice Thomas likes to say when he writes dissents when they don't take these cases, which he's done several times now. And so based on previous rulings, we know that, Thomas, Alito, Gorsuch, and Kavanaugh are very strongly protective of the Second Amendment, and they believe in a more expansive Second Amendment than even what's been laid out in Heller. right? Whereas Roberts was he ruled for Heller in Heller versus DC. Like he was part of that court, and in McDonald too. So, he has a track record of ruling in favor of strong Second Amendment protections.
Have you ever met Dick?
Yes, I have.
He is such a cool guy. If you ever have a chance to meet Dick Heller, do not turn it down. He is such a cool guy. Anyway, I digress. I'm sorry. I just want to know if you actually met Dick. He's such a cool guy.
I just did a story on him recently. Actually, DC still has all kinds of shenanigans they like to pull on gun owners there. And recently, there was an issue with handgun transfers into the city. If you want to buy a handgun, it was very difficult to transfer it into the city legally. And so he was considering maybe another lawsuit over that. He's always kind of considering new lawsuits at any given point because he's a gun guy, and he doesn't like a lot of the restrictive stuff that they try to institute in DC. And to his credit, the courts have sided with him more often than they've sided with the city. So, but in that case, Roberts was on Heller's side. So he has a track record of interpreting the Second Amendment to actually mean something, right? It's a novel concept, but to at very least mean something. Like
at least needs to mean what it's written as at minimum.
And so, you have, but recently the question has been whether or not Roberts, so you have a 5-4 majority already in theory, because you've got 5 justices on the court that have a track record of ruling in favor of more robust Second Amendment protections. But the issue now, and why this matters more, is that after Heller and McDonald, there was really only one other Second Amendment case that the court actually ruled on in any at all, really, which was it Sortino in Massachusetts. It was about stun guns, but it was essentially just and it was only like a 2-page ruling that said, look, the Second Amendment applies, as we said in Heller, to modern firearms, as modern technologies.
So they were trying to surmise that a stun gun is not protected by the Second Amendment, which is absurd.
And to be fair, in that case, that was a unanimous decision by the Supreme Court saying that the ruling in Massachusetts was wrong and that stun guns are protected under the Second Amendment. But that's a relatively small case, obviously, and they haven't done anything since McDonald that's really expansive.
Yeah, you haven't seen the Supreme Court handle things like the bump stock ban making it to the Supreme Court, or things like the NFA. One could even just say the NFA in general is unconstitutional, right? One could argue that you can't tax a right, right? It clearly says you can't tax a right. So if someone has to pay a $200 tax stamp to own XYZ, whatever that piece of technology might be, requiring a tax to take advantage of a right or to use your rights could be constitutionally questionable.
It could be, right? And I would say that all Heller and McDonald really do is establish that the Second Amendment means something. And at the very least, it means that you can't ban the possession of handguns outright for everyone.
Yeah, it's an individual right.
That's exactly.
Right.
Now, that's what Heller and McDonald v. Chicago were about. They had total bans on people owning handguns. And so if you read Heller, it's not super expansive, and it doesn't go beyond really that. And so while it's important to establish in Supreme Court precedent that the Second Amendment applies to individuals, like you just said, that there's a lot more to be litigated. Like you look at First Amendment litigation over, your right to worship, your right to free speech. There's so much of that that's been on the books for hundreds of years. They've been litigating what exactly it means in all these specific situations.
So they probably heard a lot more of those cases than they've
accepted a lot more. And that's the thing about the Second Amendment. They haven't done much actual litigation. They haven't had many cases that they've decided. And that's where this matters, because in order for the court to take a gun case, you need 4 justices to agree to take that case. And we saw like 10 cases after the Supreme Court just took a gun case, right? They had the New York case about the transportation of firearms outside the home. New York had these crazy rules about where you could take your guns. You couldn't even take them to another home in the state. It was extremely restricted.
Yeah, very draconian.
And so that went to the court, and they were poised to rule on the merits, but New York was afraid of what they might rule. And so New York changed all their laws to try and do what's
They
called
proactively tried
mooting
to
the case.
move the situation.
Exactly. They tried to make the case irrelevant. And that's essentially what happened, because that's what the Supreme Court ruled. Okay, New York changed the law, so we're not going to do anything with this case. It's fine now because the plaintiffs got what they wanted. And then they dismissed all of the other gun cases before the court, basically. Cases about gun carry, cases about nonviolent felons, owning firearm,
red flag stuff, no telling, all kinds of stuff.
And so what was taken from that, and they don't generally give you, the Supreme Court doesn't always give you the reasoning for why they do certain things. They don't necessarily tell you why they're not taking a case. You'll sometimes get a dissent from a justice that says, we should have taken this case. And you got that in this scenario. Thomas does this a lot with gun cases, where he'll be like, what are we doing? Why haven't we taken any gun cases in a decade? It's a second class right. That's what he said. That's his argument. Like, he wants to take these cases. And the speculation is, well, you've got at least four good justices, right, that are guaranteed to want to expand Second Amendment protections in case law. So why don't they just take a case? And it's because it's the speculation, at least, is that they don't know what Roberts will do in that case. And that's why you don't have a bunch of gun cases going before the Supreme Court, because the four justices on the right are not totally sure what Roberts would do with a gun case, and the four justices on the left aren't totally sure what Roberts would do with a gun case. So they all just kind of leave it alone. And so when you switch it to a 6-3 scenario, where you have 6 more conservative justices and 3 more liberal justices,
it's a safer bet.
Then you probably will see them start to take gun cases. And you could easily see a gun carry case come up. There's one very strong candidate right now that's going through the Ninth Circuit that means stuff to finish litigation there. It had won at the circuit level, but it was on open carry in Hawaii. Young v. Hawaii. I interviewed the plaintiff in that case, this nice gentleman who lives in Hawaii, just wants to be able to carry a gun on him for protection. And it's effectively illegal to carry a gun in Hawaii. Hawaii has some very strict gun laws, probably the strictest in the country. But so he challenged this case. He won at the circuit level, and now it's going to the appellate level in the Ninth Circuit. But you could see that be a candidate for the new court to take if, in fact, you get a 6th more conservative leaning justice. You could see any number of cases come up on all sorts of things: the interstate handgun sales ban, the definition of AR-15. Lowers, there's all sorts of stuff you could see come up. I would definitely think carry would be your first one. These sort of may issue states, right, where essentially it's up to the government official whether or not they want to give you a permit, regardless of whether or not you pass the background checks and the training requirements. That would probably be a strong candidate for under Heller's decision, because Heller, again, it's. I
think an even simpler approach is even just to break it down in even simpler terms would be, can you tax a right? All right, that comes in can you require a license for a right? Can you require someone to have a license to own a gun? Can you require someone to have a training class? Can you require them to pay a $200 tax stamp? So the question really becomes is, when we look at our rights, when we look at the Constitution limits the government's power, not ours, right? So if the Second Amendment is truly meant to be taken in the way that it's written, shall not be infringed, is pretty clear constitutional language, all right? There's not very many other things in our Constitution that read in the way the Second Amendment does. It's very clear language, okay? It says everything it means and nothing it doesn't, all right? So there ain't no other way to take it. It says shall not be infringed, all right? So if we're really being honest with ourselves, and if the members of the Supreme Court are honest with themselves and can look themselves in the mirror and be honest, then they have to say that anything that is repugnant of the Constitution is not a law. So that's kind of where this becomes so important. If we get, this right conservative leaning Supreme Court justice to replace Ginsburg, okay, then we have the chance not to stack the deck, but to stack the deck. And like I said early in the video, and what still holds true, is that voting has consequences. Right? So just because the consequences of the vote don't line up with what you think is either correct or what you agree with, that doesn't matter, because if the Democrats wielded that same sword, they would swing it hard and they would sharpen it with a good whetstone before they did it. You better believe it. You better believe it. They would have done it 110%. So not only should Trump nominate whatever appointees that he wants, I think they should vote before the election, because that consequence, can go a couple of different directions. As you said, it could negatively hurt Trump, but I don't think so, because I think that there's going to be a heck of a lot of people that are on the conservative end of things, which, obviously is a huge proponent of his voter base, his constituency, that are going to go, you know what? He could have taken the safe political play and waited till after the election to appoint someone. But he stuck his neck out knowing that there could be some negative ramifications in that, well, if you're not going to get reelected, you might as well do one good thing on the way out. And that's put in a proper, he'll be responsible at that point for 3 Supreme Court justices. So when you look at the people he's nominated, he could have chosen much worse people, and he didn't. So I think that says a lot for the longevity of that idea and the longevity of what he's trying to accomplish. Whether or not you like Trump is irrelevant to the fact that that Supreme Court justice that he appoints in the next couple of days, and who will likely win the nomination, is going to be in office for a very long time, because it is a life position unless they resign. So you're talking a ramification that could last 20 or 30 years or more versus, 4 more years of Trump, whether you like or hate that. I feel like the ramifications and the consequences of that are far less reaching than a potential Supreme Court justice who might live another, however long.
Although that's one interesting thing about it, because if Trump says, I won't make this appointment until after the election, so you have to vote for me in order to get this appointment, that's another strong thing he could do politically if he wanted to. I don't think if he makes the appointment before the election, you take the risk, obviously, but that could help you politically too.
I think he understands the long game more than people may be giving him credit for, because, how old is Trump now? He's 72, 73, something like that. He's in his early 70s. Yeah. I mean, look, if I was 72 years old, I think that I'd be looking at, what I need to do to probably try to relax and spend some time with my family and my grandkids. I mean, look, being a leader like that is not easy. Okay. And you have the media constantly bashing you, slinging your name through the mud, doing all these things. So it's like, at what point do you just go, you know what, just screw it? So just the fact that he's fighting so hard, whether or not you like Trump, is irrelevant. I'm not like on the Trump train. Don't think I am. Okay. I call out strengths and weaknesses as I see them in every single person. Okay. In the same breath that I can say that Ruth was a strong woman and led an amazing life, I can still say, hey, here's some things that Trump did that are good and I agree with, and then here's some other things on the constitutional side that we can agree that we definitely don't agree with, such as the bump stock ban, support of red flag laws, coming out and saying, I hate suppressors. Oh, suppressors, I don't like them. Oh, take the guns first, due process second. I can call out the tarnished portions of the pot and say, hey, we need to polish this and get it a little right, So Trump's position, it sucks, because what it comes down to is when a gun group like the NRA can come out and say, oh, well, we're going to give Trump an A+ rating or whatever. The new normal for being pro-gun is not being anti-gun. And that's the wrong answer, right? So if someone says, well, the 8-year attack on your Second Amendment rights has come to a screeching halt, all right? That in itself is not an untrue statement, but it is a misleading statement, because it doesn't show solidarity. It doesn't say, hey, as a pro-gun presidential candidate, I promise to do everything in my power to restore long-lost rights. That's a much more concisive statement that can really make a much more distinctive position on a given issue. But to simply say that the attack on your rights are over is kind of a cop-out. And we're seeing that not only is it a cop-out, but it is kind of rung in a much nastier sound than what we really expected to see. So if Trump does nominate the Supreme Court justice and they are brought in before the election, which is very possible, incredibly likely, then we could almost say that is maybe a tiny little logistical win that won't make his 2A transgressions disappear, but will be ultimately, whether he's elected or not, a part of what his legacy will be 30 years down the road. And only time will reveal what that will mean for us. But I think the danger of not putting in a Supreme Court justice while we have the ability to put in someone we know is sensible, not doing that is far, far more dangerous than playing the long game and hoping that you can use it as some bargaining chip. So, and I don't think that's in Trump's nature. I think Trump is like, I'm going to do what I want to do, and I'm going to do it just because it pisses you off. And that's how he is. The fact that the left came out and was so adamant about, oh, we should wait till after the election. Trump probably is like, I bet you would. So what do you think Trump's going to do? You think he's going to wait till after the election? No, he's going to do it.
But along those lines, though, about ensuring that this new justice is sensible or does align with Thomas or Scalia's view of the Second Amendment. It'll be interesting to see these top two candidates, right? Because they don't have a ton of history in Second Amendment cases. Now, Amy Coney Barrett does. She was on the appellate court for a recent case dealing with the permanent disenfranchisement of felons, nonviolent felons, people who've committed nonviolent felonies at some point in their life.
How does she vote in that?
They're not allowed to, right, as the law stands now, you're not allowed to own a gun at all ever if you committed a nonviolent felony. Now, the court, she was on a 3-judge panel. The other 2 judges ruled in favor of the law. She was the dissent, ruling that it wasn't constitutional to have a lifelong prohibition on someone who committed a nonviolent felony and has no record of recommitting other crimes.
Well, I think it's safe to say that if she can come to that constitutional distinction in that decision, then one must also assume that a free man who has done nothing wrong in his entire life shouldn't have to pay $200 to own an item that is legal. And you know what I mean? It's a common item like a suppressor, a short-barreled rifle, a machine gun. These are common items that regular law-abiding folks own on a regular basis. So if she can maintain the position that a felon can have their rights restored, I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole. We're paraphrasing her decision. Then it's safe to say that that same woman likely would vote yay from a constitutionality standpoint on any 2A, because that's pretty clear. Possibly,
right. I mean, it gives you some insight into her thought process at the very least. So she has at least something of a record. Yeah. LaPoa doesn't have as much in terms of actual rulings. It doesn't seem like she's had any cases either she was on the Florida Supreme Court and then the 11th Circuit Appeals Court, and she didn't do any gun cases at those 2 levels. She spent about 12 years as a lower level judge in Florida. But as far as I could tell from what we know right now, there aren't any gun cases there either. So all you really have to go off for her is some of the things she said when she was questioned during her confirmation hearing for the 11th Circuit. And she was asked specifically by Dianne Feinstein, the Democrat, obviously very anti-gun Democratic senator from California. She asked her a series of questions on the Heller precedent and, whether or not she, her different thoughts on that. And obviously a lot of the questions from these senators are very pointed and meant to try.
Oh, they're definitely trying to weed you out and figure out who you are.
But basically she didn't say a whole lot. She mostly just said, that, as a sitting justice of the Supreme Court of Florida and a judicial nominee, it would not be appropriate for me to opine on how Heller may apply in future cases, but that she would abide by the precedent. She did say, she was asked if Heller left room for common sense gun regulation. That was the term that Dianne Feinstein used when she asked her this question. And her response was, in Heller, the Supreme Court stated that, quote, the right secured by the Second Amendment is not unlimited. The court further explained that, quote, nothing in our opinion should be taken to cast doubt on longstanding prohibitions on the possession of firearms by felons and the mentally ill, or laws forbidding the carrying of firearms in sensitive places such as schools and government buildings, or laws imposing conditions and qualifications on the commercial sale of arms. So she just quoted from, she's essentially saying, look, here's what Heller says, and that's what I would abide by as an appellate court judge. Because remember, appellate court judges, they have to, in theory at least, this isn't always the case, and there's been a lot of consternation from gun rights people about how Heller has been more or less ignored by lower courts, but they're supposed to take what the Supreme Court says in a decision and apply that to the cases that they're dealing with. And so oftentimes in these sort of confirmation hearings, that's basically what they'll say when they get asked about things. They'll say, look, the Supreme Court ruled on this, and I would apply it because that's the precedent, because I'm an appellate court judge. Now, when you get to the Supreme Court and you're the one making the precedents, then those questions become a little more open-ended.
It takes on a different appeal after that.
You said that's the precedent now, and that's what you applied when you were an appellate judge, because that's how it's supposed to work. But how would you rule now that you're going to be the one making the precedents? And that's something you can't really ever know for sure, to be fair to any of these justices. Like, you can look at their track record, and that's where, like, someone like Lapua, you might want to have a little more scrutiny as a Second Amendment person, Second Amendment advocate, looking at her record. There's not a lot to go off of as far as we can tell. Maybe there'll be a case that'll come up and we'll get a little more insight as we dig into her a little more.
Sure.
But right now, there is at least some chance that, she said she would abide by Heller as an appellate judge. She hasn't gotten a case to that, regard yet. So we don't know exactly how that would work out if she became, a Supreme Court justice. And that's where you have to be more careful, because there's plenty of times in history where especially Republicans will pick justices that they think are closer to their philosophy, who turn out to not be in the long run and rule oftentimes against them, or swing vote or whatever. And, look, judges, ideally, you're supposed to pick someone based off of their ability to apply the Constitution and logically think through the case and not just import their opinions.
Right.
But obviously, in practice, that's often a difficult thing to suss out in a confirmation hearing. And so that's where you just have to be, I think, try to be skeptical. It's a lifetime appointment. Like, I know a lot of people in the gun world are very big Trump fans, and they'll probably just, whatever he wants to do, they'll be on board with, and that's reasonable enough. But, it is important to actually look into what these people believe and how they will apply this, and make sure that you get them to give you at least some understanding of that, before you give them 40 years on the court.
Well, there was a couple of things earlier before we started the video that we were discussing that I wanted to bring up, just so we don't forget them. I wanted to, bring it up here. One is that there are some Republicans that are pushing to not, vote in the Senate on the Supreme Court pick till after the election. And I almost wonder if it's because they're worried that their voter base is going to find out that they're rhinos. So that's one thing to consider, is that the vote, the good thing about bringing the vote up is that if there are any rhinos in the Senate that are fence sitters, you're going to find those people really quick, because they're going to vote nay, even if they're a Republican. Now, we know of two. How many are being silent about it and just hoping that this thing's going to boil over and they're going to dodge a bullet? And what you wind up running into is, when you get all of these Supreme Court justices in one place, as you mentioned before, Steve, is that they become a little bit more moderate. If they're liberal, they do tend to kind of get a little bit more moderate in their disposition the longer that they serve on that seat. Okay, so it's safe to say that someone who may have became a Supreme Court justice and went in as a known liberal and as a known, left-leaning type of person, there's another Achilles heel there, is like, as you permeate that court with more folks that are right-leaning, more conservative values, there's a pretty solid chance that they may even be able to sway the opinions of the remaining liberal Supreme Court justices, because they are intelligent and logical people. It's, they're put into these positions because of their brilliant minds, because of their knowledge of constitutional law, the Constitution, how it applies, and how to sort of, sift through it and be able to materialize into a decision. So these aren't dumb people. I mean, they understand the logic, right, in certain situations. So we can assume that there might be a bit of a peer pressure aspect that allows some of these more right-leaning folks to maybe sway the opinions, even though we may not necessarily need it per se. There is a strong chance that some minds could be changed and maybe some political goalposts for the remaining liberal justices could get moved a little bit.
And I would
possibly
also say, too, along those lines, that, we tend to think of, in the political world, the Supreme Court as like, just a scoreboard of 5 versus 4, 6 versus 3, in terms of like the 6 Republican appointees, 3 Democratic appointees, 6. But oftentimes, in the vast majority of cases, the Supreme Court doesn't divide along those lines. And yes, it happens in controversial cases, fairly regularly in terms of like really high profile cases.
Because once you vote, once you put your name on the yay, I support this, that's record forever. And your voters, the voters for that party are going to be like, well, dang, this Supreme Court justice voted yay for this when I thought that their ideology lined up with
That's what gets a lot of the attention, is like the really high profile cases where it's like a narrow 5-4, 6-3 vote.
Sure.
But more often than not, most of these cases come down 7-9. Like the 2016 Sertrano, I forget how to pronounce it, but the Massachusetts stun gun case was unanimous. Like even though there's obviously a heated difference in approach to the Second Amendment between the liberal justices and the conservative ones, when it came to the Supreme Court in that case was saying, look, you're just ignoring what we'd ruled previously, the liberal justices joined into that one too. And it's something that happens a lot more. Like we view the court very politically because, that's how it gets covered. That's where all the attention goes, to the really heated, charged cases. But oftentimes these justices not only are friends with each other, like Ginsburg and Scalia were, but are on the same page in a lot of situations. The Supreme Court deals with so many different issues that we only really focus on the ones that are hot button political issues at any given time.
Yeah, and what matters to us. I mean, they do end up getting a very well-rounded view from the amount of cases that they take and from so many different places that those cases originate from. It does give them a much different view of what Americans want. Like they have the finger on the pulse maybe in a little bit different way than a lower court might have.
Sure.
100%. Well, guys, I definitely want to thank you for watching today's video. We hope you enjoyed this gun gripe. I will have Stephen back on some other videos with us, so be sure to tune in for that. Follow him on Twitter, Stephen Gutowski, and also follow the Washington Free Beacon if you're on Twitter. They're very active on there. But thanks for joining us today, man.
Yeah, man.
Appreciate
Thanks for having
it.
me.
Absolutely. Guys, have a great day. We've got many more videos on the way. If you love the channel and you wish to support us, some of the most direct ways you can do so, go over to Ballistic Ink and pick yourself up a t-shirt. We've also got some great man cans on sale. In fact, this recent run of man cans we're doing right now, we're about to close the sales on them. So if you want a man can, get your order in now before we start shipping, so you get in on this cycle. So I just wanted to, provide that there. But have a great day. We'll see you next time.